Bamboo Shadow Love. Chapter 1, The Hidden Secrets Rise. In the ancient mansion of the southeast water town, an 18-year-old girl named Lee Ruoki has been pampered by her family since she was a child, and she was born gentle and innocent. Her life is like a small garden with winding paths, the seasons change, but it is always quiet. However, fate seems to have woven an extraordinary texture for her. Her fiancé, Fang Chengyuan, was young and handsome, gentle and elegant, devoted to the study of classics, and was the most respected sage in the mansion. And her stepsister, Fang Xiun, is graceful, shrewd and capable and tactful, and everyone admires her wisdom and talent. An unexpected misunderstanding made Lee Ruoki discover that Fang Chengyuan and Fang Xiun had already quietly had feelings for each other. She didn't panic, she didn't show any emotion, and she went about her life as usual. The only concern in her heart is still reading, and she has no intention of worldly things. However, Mrs. Lee Ruoki's grandmother, couldn't stand her precious granddaughter being bullied by her stepsister, so she was furious and decided to intervene. "I can't let this happen again," the old lady said categorically. Her face that had been baptized by time rarely showed a little anger. "Since they have chosen that path by themselves, then don't blame me for intervening." That night, Mrs. Lee found her young friend, Min Hailan, a lady from a famous family, with good reputation and morality. Min Hailan's son, Min Hangzi, is a well-known noble son, with calm manners, noble conduct and profound knowledge since childhood, which can be called a talented family. "Hangzi, this time, Ruoki's matter, you will do it for me," Mrs. Lee said bluntly. Min Hangzi looked at her grandmother, with a calm gaze in her eyes, but her expression also had a hint of helplessness. If she has no intention of men and women, these are just floating clouds for her, and if grandma does this, I am afraid it will increase the burden in her heart. That's what I don't want to see. I can't watch her being used. Mrs. Lee's tone was resolute. Min Hangzi was silent for a moment, and finally nodded. "Since this is the case, then I will make a marriage contract for her. If her heart changes in the future, I will fulfill her." So, this marriage contract was quietly set between Lee Ruoki and Fang Chengyuan, who were unaware. The two have never met each other, and their understanding of each other is limited to the evaluation of the outside world. Chapter 2, Unexpected Encounters. Lee Ruoki was not aware of the change in fate. She still reads at her desk every day, holding the 4 books and 5 classics and immersing herself in the fragrance of ink. In her heart, whether it is her fiancé's betrayal or the arrangement of the family, it is like the wind passing without a trace. For her, the ocean of knowledge is the only consolation. Until one day, she met Min Hangzi. Min Hangzi is not as cold and arrogant as rumored, but an extremely gentle gentleman. His words are concise and his manners are appropriate, and every conversation with Lee Ruoki makes her feel fresh and profound. Lee Ruoki found that she seemed to be inadvertently attracted by the calm and wisdom of this young man. "Min Gongzi, why don't you read some Confucian scriptures? Maybe it will help you understand the world better." Lee Ruoki smiled slightly. She had never spoken to anyone like this. This relaxed atmosphere made her feel comfortable for a long time. Min Hangzi looked at her. Her eyes were calm with a hint of appreciation. "Miss Ruoki, there are not only truths in books in this world. Many times, people's hearts are more complex than the wisdom in books." Lee Ruoki nodded lightly, but didn't ask more. She continued to read and occasionally exchanged some ideas with Min Hangzi, but she always maintained a distance from her emotions. However, as time passed, Lee Ruoki found herself developing some subtle feelings for Min Hangzi. She wasn't sure if it was love or pure respect, because she had never had a real love experience in her heart. Chapter 3, The Beginning of Heartbeat. On a moonlit night, Lee Ruoki and Min Hangzi walked together in the courtyard, surrounded by a quiet bamboo forest, where the wind blew gently and the bamboo leaves rustled. At this moment, they are like 2 lonely stars, attracting each other in this tranquility. "Master Min, thank you for being with me during this time," Lee Ruoki said softly, and a trace of unknown emotion rose in her heart. Min Hangzi turned to look at her. A flash of deep thought seemed to flash in her eyes, but then she returned to calm. He smiled slightly. "Miss Ruoki, I just did my duty as a friend during this time, so I don't need to thank you." But Lee Ruoki suddenly felt a tremor in her heart. She had never felt this feeling so sincerely. She lowered her head and said lightly, "Maybe I am no longer as indifferent to marriage as I used to be." When Min Hangzi heard this, a trace of imperceptible emotion flashed in his eyes, but he immediately calmed down. "Miss Ruoki, maybe you can give yourself some time to truly understand what you are thinking." This night, Lee Ruoki couldn't sleep for a long time. and she finally understood that her feelings for Min Hangzhi may not only be dependent on friends, but also a little affection. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 4, Intertwined Destinies. As Li Ruoqi got in touch with Min Hangzhi more and more, she gradually found that her feelings for Min Hangzhi were not only respect and friendship, but also like a vine growing quietly, deeply into her heart. And Min Hangzhi, although she was indifferent to her at first, but in getting along many times, she gradually found that her feelings for her had changed subtly. After a spring rain, Li Ruoqi and Min Hangzhi met again, and this time, Min Hangzhi finally did not hide his intentions. He looked at Li Ruoqi and said softly, "Ruoqi, I think I can no longer ignore the relationship between us." Li Ruoling was stunned, her heart was beating faster, and suddenly, she felt that she understood all her feelings. She smiled slightly, with a hint of tenderness in her eyes. "Young man, I also have something to say about you." Chapter 5, Unexpected Sincerity. As the days passed, Li Ruoqi found that her mood was also quietly changing. She originally thought that she would be forever immersed in the world of books and classics, however, Min Hangzhi's appearance was like a warm spring breeze, silently integrated into her life, and made her begin to understand those emotions that could not be touched in books. One morning, Li Ruoqi was reading in the courtyard, flipping through the volume of Mencius in his hand, but he could not concentrate. Her mind always involuntarily returned to the conversation with Min Hangzhi that day. She knew that she could no longer turn a blind eye to the relationship. Min Hangzhi felt the subtle changes in Li Ruoqi's emotions. He did not understand people's hearts, but he was extremely sensitive to the changes in emotions. He knew that he would never be able to keep his mind on this engagement after all. One day, Min Hangzhi came to the Li mansion, originally planning to meet briefly to discuss some family matters, but he made a decision in his heart. When he stood in front of Li Ruoqi, his eyes were deep and his tone was low. He looked directly into her eyes, and finally said the words that had been pressed in his heart for a long time. "Ruoqi, in fact, I don't just fulfill the marriage contract." Min Hangzhi's voice carried a hint of firmness. "I have an irrepressible emotion for you." Li Ruoqi's heartbeat accelerated suddenly, and an inexplicable excitement surged in her chest. She looked at the man in front of her, who had been so cold and distant, and her eyes were no longer pure respect or politeness, but some kind of emotion that she herself could not explain. "Master Min," Li Ruoqi's voice trembled slightly, and she was speechless for a while. She never imagined that she would fall into the emotional vortex so quickly. Min Hangzhi smiled slightly, revealing a hint of tenderness in her eyes. "Ruoqi, my heart no longer belongs to me." At this moment, Li Ruoqi understood the deep desire in her heart. Her heart is no longer the calm sea of books, but full of every trace of thought about Min Hangzhi, and even the former indifference has turned into strong emotions. She bowed her head slightly and whispered, I'm not the girl who only cares about books anymore." A gentle smile appeared on Min Hangzhi's face. He gently took Li Ruoqi's hand and said softly, "Then, Ruoqi, let's go down together, no matter what the future holds." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 6, Conflict and Choice. However, the path of fate is not always smooth. The relationship between Li Ruoqi and Min Hangzhi is not just between the two. Her family, especially Mrs. Li, did not fully approve of this marriage contract. She has already arranged for her granddaughter, Fang Chengyuan, a well-read and gentle fiancé. How could she let this long-cherished plan be disrupted by a sudden turn of events? "Ruoqi." There was a hint of anger in old lady Li's tone. "How can you treat the Fang family like this? Fang Chengyuan is a family friend of our two families, and this marriage contract has long been predestined." Li Ruoqi's heart suddenly sank. She knew how firm her grandmother's determination was. She has been loved by her grandmother since she was a child, and she has never lived up to her expectations. However, at the moment, she felt an inner struggle. Her feelings for Min Hangzhi are getting deeper and deeper, and it seems that all this is no longer something she can control. "Grandma, it's not that I don't want to fulfill my family's expectations." Li Ruoqi's voice was gentle and resolute, "but I know now that in my heart, Fang Chengyuan is no longer there. Min Hangzhi, he's the one I want to spend my life with." After hearing this, Mrs. Li's face changed, and she suddenly turned pale with anger. "What did you say? Ruoqi, how can you be so ruthless?" "Grandma, I never wanted to hurt anyone, I just wanted to live the life I really wanted." Li Ruoqi's eyes flashed with determination. "I know that such a choice will disappoint you, but I can't ignore my heart anymore." After Mrs. Li heard this, she suddenly fell into a long silence. She looked at the granddaughter in front of her who had been raised by her since she was a child, and her heart was full of helplessness and distress. She knows that Ruoki has grown up, she has her own choice, and perhaps, this is a turning point in her life. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 7, The Promise of Love. Finally, after a night of deep thought, Mrs. Lee finally made a decision. She understands that Ruoki has grown up and can no longer be tied to her expectations. Perhaps, she should let go and let her granddaughter follow her heart. Ruoki, I promise you, since you have chosen Min Hangzhi, then, I am also willing to fulfill you. Mrs. Lee's voice was low, but with a hint of helplessness and tenderness. A hint of surprise flashed in Lee Ruoki's eyes, and then a grateful smile appeared. Thank you, Grandma. Min Hangzhi also entered the house at this time, and he was relieved to see that the relationship between Lee Ruoki and Mrs. Lee had been resolved. He walked up to Lee Ruoki and said softly, Ruoki, this is our beginning. Lee Ruoki smiled and nodded, her eyes full of determination and tenderness. Yes, that's where we started. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 8, The Oath of Eternity. When all the dust settled, the marriage contract between Lee Ruoki and Min Hangzhi was officially concluded. The two did not hold a grand wedding immediately, but chose a spring afternoon, strolling alone in the bamboo forest, and promised each other for life. Ruoki, along the way, our moods have changed. I am no longer the calm and noble Min Hangzhi, but with you as a person, I am by my side. Min Hangzhi's eyes revealed sincere feelings. Lee Ruoki smiled slightly and said softly, I am no longer the girl who only knows how to read, I have learned how to love and how to cherish. The two looked at each other quietly, with only each other's figures in their eyes and each other's vows in their hearts. No matter what the future holds, we will go on together and never be separated. Min Hangzhi said in a low voice, his tone full of promise. Lee Ruoki nodded, smiled, and said, never separate.